Welcome to One Way to Machines and the B7 Audi RS4 series. In this video, we'll be covering the full removal and reinstall process of the front bumper on the B7 RS4. The wheels have been removed on this car for better camera angles. You can do this job with the wheels in place. Release hood latch and open hood for access to the top bolts on the bumper. Place interlocking foam mats or cardboard underneath the bumper of the car. Remove 1, 2, 3 T30 bolts. There are 2 plastic connector tabs underneath the bumper. This particular RS4 is missing its cover, so they aren't there or connected to anything, but I'm going to show you where they are if your car has everything intact. This is the first one, this is the second one, this is the third one, this is the fourth one, and also right behind the air curtains here on both sides there is a small hole. This most likely would be holding a T30 bolt into the OEM engine cover. So look for those in case you have everything in place. Here's the same hole on the driver's side. Remove T25 self-tapping screws. The other side has 4, this side has 3. There could be more. It's an old car. It's missing one on this side. Just get out as many as you can until you can gently pull back the fender liner to access the screws that hold on the bumper. There aren't too many bolts in this job and they're not easy to mix up, so you can just use something like an old paint bottle spray cap can to store your bolts as you go around the car. Gently peel back fender liners. Place jack stands or blocks underneath bumper so that you can help catch it when it falls. This is so that the fog light connectors and possibly the washer fluid connectors don't get too much stress on them. They are designed to have some room for play, so if you don't do this step, it's not important. This is more fail-safe. In this case, the car is jacked up, and I have the wheels off so that we can do better filming. If your car is completely on the ground and you're lowered, you don't need to do anything underneath because the amount of drop that the bumper will have will not be as drastic as what I'm dealing with here. So this is only for people that have their car jacked up in the air. If you are using the jack stands, you may want to put a microfiber cloth in between the bumper contact with the jack stand. The foam pads we put at the beginning are for the people with their car not jacked up, because as you come to take the bumper off, it's going to fall onto the ground a little bit and the foam is there to protect the bottom. Remove 1, 2 T25 self-tapping screws from both the driver's side and the passenger side. So we have 1, 2 10mm nuts that need to come off to release the bumper. The top one we can do with extensions and sockets. The bottom one you might be able to squeeze something in there, but there is a coolant pipe there which is flexible and a wire that you don't want to put too much pressure on, so we're going to use another method. Okay, so for the top one, this is about a 7-inch extension with a universal joint on it. This will get out the top 10mm nut. Just put it on a ratchet and use it. The one on the bottom, for easier access, this is a flexible 10mm ratcheting wrench. And what we're going to do is hold it up. Mine's very floppy. Some of them are a bit more rigid. Hold it up. You're going to go in with both hands and you're going to guide this onto the nut and the stud there. And you're going to gently release it. and pull the nut out. Okay, so here we are back in the wheel well, and you can see that we've gotten that bottom bolt out. Using this 10 millimeter, you got to get in there with your one hand. I wasn't able to film it, and you're going to work blind. You have to have control over your left hand using a combination of your thumb, your index finger, or your thumb and your middle finger at some points. And you're going to have to use the ratcheting mechanism all with one hand. The whole thing is with one hand, and your hand's going to be rubbing on the inside here. So you have to be very gentle, painstaking amount of patience to get that bottom one off. Once you get it a certain way, you just put your left hand in there and you can thread it off. The top bolt's going to be much easier. For the top bolt on the passenger side, you're going to need at least a minimum of 8.5 inches of extension if you're using a standard ratchet. And I've kept my 1/4 inch bits in here, so there's a 1/4 inch universal joint and a small 10 millimeter socket with an adapter for 1/4 inch to 3/8. I also had the deeper socket 10 and a larger universal joint, but I'm not going to use those. This combination here, 8.5 inches extension, adapter, universal joint, and small 10 millimeter is enough on a standard ratchet to get the top bolt. Okay, so right in there, you'll see one of the 10 millimeter nuts, and off camera, just slightly above there, about 3 inches above that one, is the second one. I have ditched the 1/4 inch attachments and the adapters, okay? Even for the top one on the other side, it really isn't necessary. And I would recommend you do have a slightly deep socket 10 millimeter, as the one on the other side, the top one, seemed to have been a bit loose, which is why the really small 10 millimeter socket was able to grab the nut. So keep your 8.5 inches of extension if you are using a standard ratchet still. But on the end, I have just a 3/8 deep socket 10 millimeter, and this is all straight, no universal joints. It's able to hit both the bottom one and the top one. And I went back to the other side, and it's able to do the top bolt on the other side as well with this setup. So this is what you should really go for. One of the differences on the driver's side versus the passenger side, on the passenger side, you have enough room once you've loosened up the 10 millimeter nut to get in there with your hand and loosen it, grab it, bring it out. On the driver's side, there's not that much hand access. So you want to take your extensions off of the end of the ratchet once you've loosened it, and then go in there and turn it by hand, and the 10 millimeter nut, gently bring it out using the socket. Remove one more T25 bolt from each side, passenger and driver, which is facing down inside of the bumper here. For this task on both sides, I'm using a mini wrench with a T25 inside. It fits fairly well there, and you may have one of these for other jobs. It's just a 1/4 inch small ratcheting wrench. Push and pull on the bumper from various angles to release it from its tabs. You may have to move your jack stands, blocks, foam blocks, whatever you've put under the car as you're doing this if you're alone. This step is easier with 2 people if it's in the air. If you're working with the car on the ground with the wheels still on, you can probably just pop it off yourself and it'll settle on the ground nicely with the cardboard or foam underneath. Once you've pulled it off about 1 inch, go to the front of the car and remove it carefully with both hands, looking down into the bumper to mind your fog lights and your headlight washers. After I removed them a bit more, the jack stands are doing their job, but it's better to have a third leg at the front there to hold the front of the bumper once you try to get it more further off in order to support it and get in there and unplug one of the connectors. This is the first time I've taken the bumper off on this one, and somebody has disconnected the headlight washer fluid lines, so there is only one electrical connector on the driver's side that needs to be removed, but still have 3 points of contact to hold the bumper if you are jacked up in the air. If you're down on the ground, still maybe you'll have to slide a 2x4 or something underneath there, because it's not clear on your car exactly what's going on and how far your bumper is going to drop down, in which case it could damage wiring connections if you're not careful. So as you can see in the front there, I've put 2 small interlock bricks and another toolkit that I had, just round some stuff up and make a third point of contact for your bumper when you take it off. Okay guys, so this shot here is just for a reference point for when you guys are going to do this yourselves. This is the driver's side headlight. Okay, I've slightly brought it forward and it's sitting on 3 points at the front. And the place that we're zooming in right now next is right here under the headlight. Okay guys, so here is the washer fluid for the headlights connection. There is no line going into it. Whether this car had it, it's been disconnected and plugged by a previous owner, I'm not sure, but in my case, there's nothing even going to either one on either side. The only electrical connector left is going to be right here. It's this one. And what this attaches to on the RS4, most of them come with Audi's HomeLink system, which is for opening your garage door, which is located in the bumper, and to power the fog lights. So they've made it convenient in a way that the only wiring that you have to remove here is this one connector, and it seems that there is a second one. So there are 2 connectors here that you need to remove. Hopefully you can see both of them in this shot. And they're just like all the other Audi connectors. Just put a flathead screwdriver in there, push in gently, and then pull out. Before we go there, I'm going to show you another brilliant move of mine. I had everything inside of that paint cap there, and right as I went to get my screwdriver over from my workstation, I kicked over all the nuts and bolts that I've collected from this job. Fortunately, they didn't go too far, but once you've collected all your bolts, try to store them at a higher point than the floor. Put them on a table, a counter, something like that. Keep them in the paint cap, but don't put them on the floor. You could kick them over. Okay guys, so as you saw here, I used different orientations of the screwdriver. One of them I was able to just pop out using my thumb. These connectors look like they had somewhere that they seated, so on your car they might actually be mounted to something. One of them looked like it had a broken tab on the bottom. I can't find it now. Maybe it didn't, but if they're in the air like that, okay, like they were on mine, you're going to have a lot of control not to put too much pressure on the wires that are going into them. And use a screwdriver or even just your finger to release the guide tab, push in and out slightly. Just gently work with them until you get them out. Don't be too rigid on your technique taking them out. Try different things, but do your best not to damage any of the clips at the top or the actual guide tab when you're releasing them. When you come to remove the bumper, don't worry about mixing up those 2 connectors. One of them is a 4-prong, one is a 10. I'm not sure which is HomeLink, which is fog lights, but it doesn't matter. Physically remove the bumper from the car at this point. Now that the bumper is off, you can get a better look at the 2 connectors that you were going to remove. I'm pretty sure yours will also be loose. I can't find any broken thing that I said this might have been attached to somewhere. I think they just hang there in the middle. And of course, some wonderful object at some point in this vehicle's life has totally destroyed this, making this line vulnerable here. So at some point we'll have to drop hundreds of dollars on a new piece of plastic or repair this. So that'll be for another video. The RS4 bumper sits much nicer than most other cars that I've worked with. It just sits flat on the ground, so you don't need to think up any supports. The purpose of this video is just a bumper removal, regardless of whether you want to repaint it, just change your fog lights, or fix some other broken part or do a modification. But the fog lights are down here. We might swap them out to yellow because I think that might look good on this car. But that's it for here. The only thing that I can say is, if you're alone and you're not carrying it by the thicker parts of the bumper, when you lean over the front and grab inside of here, this plastic is much more brittle than the actual bumper material. So you want to reach in as far as you can with your hand and hold it with the back part of your palm and your full hand. So you want two hands as far in as you can into the bumper if you're standing on the outside and you're holding it and carrying it over, because this stuff will crack and break on you. It's very brittle at the top. Before we go back to the reinstall process and tips on that, I want to go over something that happens to people sometimes when changing out taillights or headlights, or a specific thing. In this case, the headlight on the driver's side on this car is in perfect condition, but this bracket here has a crack on this one, and the bolt here is holding it. There's another bolt that's supposed to be in here, I'm pretty sure, which is also not there for some reason. And say for some reason this bolt was loose or something, there's a lot of play in this headlight. So check your headlights before you completely remove it, because the last thing you want is for something like this to fall and for things to break. On this car, the lens is replaceable, so it wouldn't be so bad. But on some cars, you have to replace the entire assembly. So just pay attention to other things that might be loose being held in by the bumper before you remove it. Bring the bumper back and snug it into its place until you hear the clips on the fenders click in. Okay, so now that I came to bring the bumper back over, the best spots to hold it are from these two spots here. These are the strongest parts of the bumper if you're going to move it around. The reason I'm not going to go back on what I said before is when we actually put this on the car, these are not going to be accessible by your hand. So you may have to move your hands around to push it in. So this is still something that you should be mindful of when you're moving it. But for the most part, if you can, grab it, pick it up from here. With the fact that there are electrical connectors in this job, you either do need two people to do it, or the method that I've been doing with the car jacked up and resting the bumper on two jack stands and another support at the front is actually quite good for not making mistakes, because you can leave the bumper in this position without worrying about anything falling off while you go to plug back in your connectors. Plug in HomeLink and fog light connectors. Make sure to hear audible clicks from the connectors. Next, lift the bumper and push it back into its place. Come back to the fender sides and give it a push with the palm of your hand in this fashion and click these back in before you go to start fastening bolts. In most projects, at this point, we do a reinstall with tips on reinstalling, because sometimes reinstalls can be tricky. This one is not that bad. Just do everything in the reverse of what we did to take it off. The only things that I will say are the 10mm nuts that go on the passenger side, the top one. The one that was, the bottom one. The one that was behind the coolant pipe and the electrical wire. Thread this one in as far as you can by hand. If your car is older or has some sand, grit, something on it, spray some penetrating fluid or some WD-40, anything just to make it a little bit more slick so that you can get it on by hand quite far, just so that you don't have to wrestle in there with your 10mm flex ratchet here. I really recommend having this for the bumper on the RS4, because that coolant pipe is something that's specific to this car. And with old coolant pipes, we all know that even if they move around a slight bit, they can break their seal, and next summer it can be a leaking coolant pipe that we have to fix. So better to take the route of doing it in a way that you don't overpressure that. So that's the only tricky bit, is the 10mm. Thread it in as far as you can by hand, and then tighten it with this. Everything else is quite straightforward. Just use the same tools that you did to take everything off. One more reinstall tip worth mentioning is on the driver's side. The same 10mm nuts that hold on to the two studs that went in from here. You're going to need your 8.5-inch extension with about a 2 to 3 inch deep socket like what I have here, 10mm. And you're going to have to put the nut inside and gently feed it through because there's no hand space to hand thread this one. So gently feed it in, feel it out with this so that you don't cross thread anything, and then hit your ratchet and tighten it.